This is the story of Jack, an 18-year-old of Bhaktapur, Nepal, who discovers his parents are part of an ancient cult called the Naga, which sacrifices descendants of the Serpent Bloodline, Sarpavanshi, in a ritual for immortality. After his friend Kiran goes missing, Jack finds evidence, dark web videos and a hidden journal, exposing his parents' crimes. The stale air of my room felt heavier than usual, a leaden weight pressing down on me as I stared at the blank wall. It had been 3 days since I'd watched that video. 3 days since my world imploded, revealing the horrifying truth about my parents. 3 days since Kiran vanished, a victim in their grotesque tapestry of terror. The police had been useless, their assurances of finding Kiran ringing hollow with every passing hour. They still had my phone, a constant reminder of their native optimism. I was Jack, now 18, and my suburban life in Bhaktapur, nestled in the ancient heart of Nepal, had been a meticulously crafted lie. My parents, Sunita and Raj, presented themselves as pillars of the community, respected shopkeepers in Durbar Square. They always seemed so calm, so normal. The move 2 years ago from our old village, a small, forgotten place tucked away in the hills, was always explained as a desire for a fresh start, a better education for me. I had accepted it, even the vague unease I felt about the many murders they'd cited as the reason. Now, the full, sickening weight of their deception crushed me. My friendship with Kiran, who lived just a few blocks away in a house whose traditional Nuari architecture now seemed to mock its gruesome secrets, was a stark contrast to the darkness that had consumed me. We were an unlikely pair, me, lost in the digital worlds of games and streamer culture, and Kiran, a quiet prodigy of code, drawn to the internet's hidden depths. His obsession with the dark web had always been a source of fascination, a harmless eccentricity. Until now. The memory of his frantic texts, his desperate pleas for me to come over, still echoed in my mind. He knew. He had stumbled upon their secret, and in his attempt to warn me, he had become another one of their victims. The detective's dismissive assurance that Kiran would be just fine felt like a cruel joke. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was gone. My computer, a silent witness to my recent trauma, sat before me. The Tor browser was still open, the hundreds of video thumbnails a stark mosaic of depravity. I had only watched 2, but they were etched into my mind, a permanent scar. The neighbor from our old village, Mrs. Shrestha, her kind face contorted in terror, her life brutally extinguished by the people who tucked me into bed at night. And then Kiran, his face, so familiar and dear, staring into the abyss, his life stolen by the very people I called family. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. How could I explain? My parents are serial killers, and I found proof on the dark web? They'd think I was insane, or worse, an accomplice. No, I had to be smart. I had to find a way to expose them, to save Kiran if he was still alive, and to ensure they never hurt anyone again. My gaze drifted to the corner of my room, where a dusty, old wooden chest sat. It was my father's, filled with his childhood keepsakes. He rarely opened it, claiming it held nothing but old memories. But a faint memory stirred within me, a conversation I'd overheard years ago, a hushed argument between my parents about something important that needed to be kept safe in that very chest. I never thought anything of it then, but now, a flicker of suspicion ignited. I cautiously approached the chest, its dark wood worn smooth with age. The latch was simple, unadorned. I lifted it, and the lid creaked open, revealing a jumble of forgotten items, yellowed photographs, a child's worn wooden toy, a few old coins. But beneath it all, tucked away in a false bottom, was a small, leather-bound journal. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. It was old, its pages brittle, the ink faded in places. The cover was plain, with no title or inscription. I opened it, and the first page was dated nearly 30 years ago. It wasn't written by my parents. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost clinical. And the content, it was a log. A meticulous record of kidnappings, tortures, and murders. Names, dates, locations. Each entry chillingly detailed, almost like scientific observations. I flipped through the pages, my breath catching in my throat. The entries spanned decades, reaching back even before my parents were born. The many murders in our old village, the reason for our move, were all meticulously documented here. Mrs. Shrestha's name was there, along with the horrifying specifics of her demise, matching the video I'd seen. But then, a new kind of terror gripped me. The victims weren't random. They were all members of a specific lineage, their family names recurring throughout the journal. And then I saw it, on a page dated just after my birth, my own mother's maiden name. And next to it, a symbol I'd seen before, though I couldn't place it. A small, almost imperceptible etching, repeated throughout the journal, always next to the names of the victims. It was a stylized, intertwined set of serpent-like figures. My mind reeled. This wasn't just my parents. This was a legacy, a horrifying family tradition. But why? What was the purpose of this sadistic ritual? I continued to flip through the journal, my eyes scanning for any clue, any explanation. And then I found it. Tucked within the pages, a brittle, folded piece of parchment. It was a hand-drawn diagram, a complex astrological chart, with various symbols and lines connecting constellations. At the center of the chart was the serpent symbol I'd noticed in the journal. And beneath it, a chilling inscription in an ancient, almost forgotten dialect of Nepali. When the stars align, and the blood of the serpent lineage flows, the great serpent awakens, and eternal life is bestowed upon the chosen. My stomach churned. Eternal life? Great serpent? This wasn't just murder. It was some twisted, ritualistic sacrifice. And my parents, they weren't just killers, they were fanatics, carrying on a generational practice. I slammed the journal shut, the revelation hitting me with the force of a physical blow. My parents weren't simply hiding a secret from me. They were part of it. They were participants in a bloodline of killers, sacrificing specific individuals for some insane promise of immortality. And the serpent lineage, was that my lineage too? Was that why my mother's name was in the journal? A new, terrifying thought solidified in my mind. What if the reason Kiran searched my last name wasn't to accuse me, but to warn me about my own family? What if he had discovered not just my parents' involvement, but the deeper, darker truth of their lineage, and that I was connected to it somehow? The blank page when I first searched my last name, followed by the appearance of the videos, it wasn't just about the victims. It was about us. I remembered the very last video, the one with Kiran. He was alive, strapped to that chair. My parents were there. Could he still be alive? Could he have been trying to tell me something specific, something only I, as part of this horrifying family, would understand? My gaze fell on the computer screen again, the hundreds of videos. I had only watched the first few. What if there was something in the other videos? A clue? A pattern? I had to go back. I had to find out everything. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I clicked on a random video. Another victim, another brutal murder. But this time, I forced myself to look beyond the horror, to search for details. The background, the objects in the room, anything. The room was always the same, a dimly lit basement, stone walls, a single, flickering bulb. But sometimes, in the background, almost imperceptible, was a small, crudely drawn symbol on the wall. It was the same serpent symbol from the journal. And in a few of the videos, a small, worn wooden box, like a ritualistic offering box, was visible on a nearby table. I rewound the video of Kiran. My parents were in the frame, my father holding the knife, my mother with the scalpel. They were dressed in dark, almost ceremonial robes. But as my father pulled the sack from Kiran's head, Kiran's eyes, wide with terror, darted towards the camera, and then, almost imperceptibly, his head tilted slightly to the right, towards a specific spot in the room. I paused the video, zoomed in. There, on the stone wall, partially obscured by shadow, was a series of faint etchings. Not the serpent symbol, but what looked like a sequence of numbers and symbols, almost like coordinates. My heart pounded. Was this it? Was this Kiran's message? A coded clue to his location, or perhaps to something else, something hidden within that cursed room? I quickly opened a new tab on the Tor browser, my fingers flying across the keyboard. This time, instead of searching my last name, I typed in Bhaktapur Ancient Rituals Serpent Lineage. The results were immediate, a torrent of academic papers, obscure historical texts, and archaeological findings. One article, from a reputable Nepali historical society, detailed the discovery of an ancient cult in the Kathmandu Valley, known as the Naga cult. They worshipped a primordial serpent deity, believing that sacrificing individuals of a specific bloodline during rare celestial alignments would grant them immortality and immense power. The article mentioned that the cult had been thought to be eradicated centuries ago, their practices condemned as barbaric. A cold dread settled over me. Naga cult. Serpent lineage. This was it. My family wasn't just a random group of killers. They were the last vestiges of a terrifying, ancient cult. And the victims, the serpent lineage, they were targeting, were likely descendants of those who had defied or betrayed the cult in the past, their blood now sought as a means of appeasing this monstrous deity. But if my mother was part of this lineage, then was I. I clicked on another article, a genealogical study of prominent families in the Kathmandu Valley. It detailed various ancient lineages, their origins, and their migrations. And there it was. My mother's maiden name, listed as a branch of a family known as the Sarpavanshi. Serpent descendants. They were not the worshippers of the Naga cult, but rather, according to the text, a lineage believed to possess a rare, inherent resistance to the cult's dark magic, and whose blood was paradoxically the most potent catalyst for the rituals. My mind raced. My parents weren't just sacrificing serpent lineage people, they were sacrificing people like us. People whose blood, according to their insane beliefs, held the key to their perverse immortality. And if that was true, then Kiran, who had no known connection to any of these families, was either a desperate, last-minute substitution, or there was a deeper layer to this horror. I replayed the video of Kiran again, focusing intently on his subtle head movement. The etchings on the wall. They looked like coordinates, but not standard geographical coordinates. They were too short, too cryptic. Then, something clicked. The traditional Nuari houses in Bhaktapur, especially the older ones, often had hidden passages, secret rooms, and even underground tunnels for various purposes: storage, escape routes during invasions, or even, in more sinister cases, for cultic practices. What if these weren't coordinates to a location, but coordinates within their own house? I remembered the layout of Kiran's house, a sprawling, ancient structure that had been in his family for generations. His room was on the second floor, directly above the kitchen where I had spoken to the detective. And behind the kitchen, there was a small, rarely used storage room, barely big enough to stand in, with a rickety wooden ladder leading down to a dirt floor basement. I had only been down there once, with Kiran, when we were looking for an old board game. It was dark, damp, and felt oppressive. The perfect place for their twisted rituals. My eyes snapped back to the video. The room where the sacrifices took place. It was the basement of Kiran's house. I was sure of it now. The stone walls, the single flickering bulb, the oppressive atmosphere. It all matched. The etchings. They weren't geographical coordinates. They were a numerical sequence, perhaps indicating a specific panel, a hidden door, or a mechanism within that basement. Kiran, in his desperate final moments, was trying to tell me where he was, or where they were keeping him. I had to get into that basement. But how? My parents were at work, but they would be home soon. Kiran's parents were still consumed by grief, and the police were still present, though their presence had dwindled to just a single patrol car. I had to act fast. I had to be smart. I opened another tab on the Tor browser and quickly searched for Nuari House Hidden Passages Bhaktapur. A wealth of information appeared, detailing the common architectural secrets of these ancient homes. Many had disguised door panels, rotatable walls, or even false shelves. I took a deep breath. This was it. The ultimate gamble. My parents were killers, bound by an ancient, gruesome cult. Kiran was their latest victim, and I, unknowingly, was connected to their dark legacy. The videos, the journal, the serpent symbol, the Naga cult, the Sarpavanshi, it all formed a monstrous, interconnected web. I shut down my computer, the glow of the screen a beacon in the encroaching darkness. I grabbed a small flashlight from my desk drawer. I couldn't call anyone. This was my fight. My heart was a drum against my ribs as I crept out of my room and down the stairs. The house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak of the floorboards, every beat of your own pulse. I slipped out the front door, avoiding the lone police car, and made my way to Kiran's house. The front door was still unlocked, a testament to the family's despair. I slipped inside, moving like a ghost. Mrs. Gonzalez was asleep on the couch, exhausted by grief. I tiptoed past her, into the kitchen, my eyes scanning the room for the storage area. I found the small, unassuming door. It was old, its paint peeling. I pushed it open, and the familiar musty smell of the basement wafted out. The wooden ladder, rickety and worn, descended into darkness. I turned on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The basement was just as I remembered, but now, every shadow seemed to hold a lurking horror. My eyes immediately went to the far wall, where the videos had shown the victims tied. And there it was, the faint etchings Kiran had indicated. I carefully examined the wall, running my fingers over the rough stone. The numbers and symbols were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. It was a sequence, 3-7-2-5-9. I knew these types of houses often had rotating panels that could be opened by pressing certain bricks in a specific order. My hands trembled as I began. I pressed the third brick from the left, then the seventh, then the second, the fifth, and finally the ninth. Nothing happened. My heart sank. Had I misread it? Then, a faint click echoed in the silence. A section of the wall, previously indistinguishable from the rest, began to slowly pivot inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. The air that rushed out was cold, stagnant, and carried a faint, metallic scent. I shone my flashlight into the passage. It led deeper, into an even more confined space. My stomach clenched, but I pushed forward, knowing this was my only chance. The passage was short, opening into a small, circular chamber. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and in the center, on a raised stone slab, was an altar. And on the altar, illuminated by a single, flickering lamp, was a large, ornate wooden box. My flashlight beam swept across the room, and then I saw it. In a darkened alcove, behind the altar, was a figure. He was slumped against the wall, bound, and gagged. "Kiran!" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. He looked up, his eyes wide, filled with a mixture of terror and relief. He was alive. Barely. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and dried blood. I rushed to him, my hands fumbling with the ropes that bound him. They were thick, secured with complex knots. As I worked, Kiran mumbled something through his gag, his eyes frantically darting towards the wooden box on the altar. I finally managed to loosen the gag. "What is it, Kiran? What's in the box?" He gasped, struggling for air. It's their source. The blood. They harvest it. From us. The Sarpavanshi. They need pure blood for the ritual. Tonight. The alignment. My blood ran cold. Tonight. The alignment. The astrological chart in the journal. They were planning a new ritual. And Kiran, if he was Sarpavanshi, was to be the next sacrifice. "But you're not Sarpavanshi," I stammered. He shook his head, wincing. "No. But my great-grandmother. She was a distant cousin. They found out. They've been tracking all the descendants." He coughed, a dry, painful sound. "They've been keeping me, draining me, mixing my blood with others they've taken, diluting it to make it last for tonight's ritual. They needed pure Sarpavanshi for the ritual itself, but they also needed a continuous supply for their longevity." "Their longevity?" "Yes," he whispered. "The blood, it's a sustenance. It prolongs their lives. makes them ageless. They're not just sacrificing for immortality, Jack. They are immortal. And they've been doing it for centuries. Your parents, they're just the latest in a long line of guardians. Guardians. My parents weren't just followers. They were the custodians of this horrific tradition. The videos, I said, a new understanding dawning on me. They're not just records. They're part of the ritual, aren't they? To document the purity of the blood, to show their deity the offerings? Kiran nodded weakly. And to show each other. A lineage of madness. They watch them, reliving their successes. It fuels them. My mind flashed back to my parents' calm demeanor, their unwavering composure. It wasn't just a facade. It was the chilling detachment of ancient predators. What do we do? I asked, finally freeing his hands. The box, Kiran rasped, pointing to the altar. It contains vials of the blood they've collected. And the mechanism that activates the ritual. If we destroy it, we disrupt the alignment. We break their power. I looked at the box, a silent, menacing presence on the altar. It was small, no more than a foot square, made of dark, polished wood, intricately carved with the same serpent symbol. How do we destroy it? I asked. Kiran looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate resolve. It's locked. But there's a key. My father, he wore it around his neck. A small silver serpent. My heart dropped. My father always wore a small, silver serpent pendant around his neck. I had always thought it was just a piece of jewelry, a cultural adornment. It was the key. We have to go back upstairs, I said. He'll be home soon. We don't have much time. Just as the words left my lips, a faint creak echoed from the passage. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. My blood ran cold. They were home. My parents. Kiran's eyes widened in terror. Hide! He hissed, pointing to a small recess in the stone wall, barely large enough for one person. I pushed him into it, then squeezed in beside him, pulling a dusty, heavy tapestry over the opening, plunging us into absolute darkness. We held our breath, listening. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They stopped just outside the hidden chamber. A low murmur. My father's voice. The alignment is almost complete, Sunita. The Naga will be pleased. My mother's voice, calm and chilling. Indeed, Raj. The Sarpavanshi essence is potent this cycle. Our immortality will be truly reaffirmed. A faint click, and then the passage door creaked open. Light spilled into the chamber. I could see the glow through a tiny gap in the tapestry. My parents entered, dressed in flowing, dark robes, their faces serene, almost beatific. My father still wore the silver serpent pendant around his neck. They moved towards the altar, their movements graceful, practiced. My mother picked up a small, crystal goblet. My father reached for the wooden box. Soon, my father murmured, the last drop will be offered, and our eternal reign will continue. They were talking about Kiran. He was still alive, still within reach. But I had to think. If I just burst out, they would overpower us. I needed a plan. My eyes scanned the small, obscured gap in the tapestry. The altar. The box. The key around my father's neck. A desperate idea formed in my mind. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But it was our only chance. I nudged Kiran. When I say go, you create a diversion. Make some noise, anything to distract them. He nodded, his eyes wide with understanding. My gaze fixed on my father's neck, the silver pendant gleaming faintly in the dim light. I took a deep breath, the metallic scent in the air making me gag. Go! I hissed. Kiran, with surprising force, kicked against the stone wall, sending a loud thud echoing through the chamber. My parents startled, their heads whipping towards the sound. What was that? My mother hissed, her serenity replaced by a flicker of irritation. In that split second of distraction, I lunged out from behind the tapestry, a scream tearing from my throat. My father, startled, spun around, his eyes wide with shock. I didn't hesitate. I plunged forward, my hand shooting out, not for his throat, but for the pendant. My fingers closed around the cold metal, and with a desperate yank, I tore it from his neck. My father roared in anger, but I was already turning, clutching the key, sprinting towards the altar. My mother, recovering from her surprise, lunged at me, a scalpel suddenly glinting in her hand. I ducked, narrowly avoiding the sharp blade, and stumbled towards the wooden box. My fingers, trembling with adrenaline, inserted the serpent key into the lock. It clicked. My parents were closing in, their faces contorted in fury. This was it. I tore open the box. Inside, nestled on velvet, were several small, glass vials filled with a viscous, dark red liquid. And in the center, a small, intricate clockwork mechanism, pulsing with a faint, eerie light. This was their ritual activator. With a primal scream, I slammed the box against the stone altar, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Glass shards flew, and the vials burst, splattering the dark liquid across the floor, the walls, and my hands. The clockwork mechanism sputtered, its light flickering, and then went dark, emitting a final, mournful hum. A deafening silence fell. My parents froze, their faces turning from fury to utter, disbelieving horror. The light in the chamber seemed to dim, and the air grew colder, heavier. "No!" my mother shrieked, her voice cracking, filled with a raw, agonizing despair. "You fool! What have you done?" My father dropped to his knees, staring at the shattered remains of the box, his hands shaking. His ageless face seemed to visibly age, lines deepening, his skin turning sallow. His eyes, once so unnervingly calm, now reflected a deep, consuming dread. "The alignment, the ritual, it's broken," he whispered, his voice hoarse, filled with a profound grief I had never imagined him capable of. "The Naga will not be appeased. We are mortal." I watched, numb with shock, as my parents, the ageless, terrifying guardians of the Naga cult, seemed to physically wither before my eyes. Their carefully constructed face crumbled, revealing the raw, vulnerable fear of ordinary humans facing their own mortality. They weren't just killers. They were desperate, deluded individuals who had clung to a horrific lie for centuries, their lives fueled by the stolen essence of others. Kiran, free from his bindings, crawled out of the alcove, his body weak but his eyes alight with a fierce, defiant triumph. He looked at me, a silent message of gratitude and terror passing between us. The police were still outside, a lone car, the officers probably bored, thinking the missing person case was going nowhere. But now, it was going somewhere. The horrifying truth, laid bare in this ancient, blood-soaked chamber, was about to shatter the quiet peace of Bhaktapur. My parents, their faces ravaged by age and despair, didn't move. They simply sat there amidst the shattered glass and spilled blood, their immortality gone, their ancient lie exposed. I knew what I had to do. The evidence was all around us. The journal, the broken box, the vials of blood, and Kiran, a living testament to their atrocities. I had broken their ritual, shattered their delusion of eternal life. Now, it was time to shatter their world. I took Kiran's hand, helping him to his feet. His body was weak, but his spirit was strong. We had survived. We had faced the darkness, and together, we had brought it to light. As we walked out of the hidden chamber, leaving my parents trapped in their dying delusion, I knew the real horror wasn't just the murders, or the ancient cult, or even the horrifying truth about my own family. It was the chilling realization that some secrets are so deeply buried, so meticulously maintained, that they become indistinguishable from the very fabric of existence, waiting for the one fateful search, the one desperate act, to finally bring them screaming into the light. And in that light, as the sirens began to wail in the distance, I knew my life would never, could never be the same.